Greetings, Talvar, and welcome to another special episode this month in the Puretide Program. I'm going to be focusing on a tier list. I've not really done one of these before, and I thought I'd do things slightly differently. And what I'm wanting to do, or the focus with this session, is to kind of give you an insight into how I view other factions in the meta as a threat to us. And you can see here on the tier list I've got a scale, and that scale is contained, which is not a threat whatsoever. It's a comfortable matchup for us. A low threat is something that it can still be a threat, but it's a low one. A moderate threat is something that you always kind of have to bear in mind, especially in the mid-tables, because there's a couple of consistently performing armies out there that are always just stable. And then you've got a high threat, which should be on a priority list, and can definitely give us a hard time. And then we've got immediate threat. So that's like something that if you're not building your list around, you are going to lose against this matchup. So the reason I'm doing this is because we've been doing a lot of focus over in the Puretide program on like the faction focus stuff and talking about the meta. And we did a war council, which is the first session that we did last Sunday. And we went in depth in terms of the discussions around these factions, came together collective as a group of commanders to talk about our experiences and learn from each other. And what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of a snippet in terms of what's going on in my brain, in terms of the state of the meta right now, and giving you that little bit of helpful advice and guidance going into what is going to be a wild, wild west for the next 3 months. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, I'm going to go from contained upwards. And I'm going to kind of try to keep it very brief, because if you want all the extra information, I would recommend going over to the Goonhammer articles, which kind of give you a deep dive of the factions and also the detachments, and they do a fantastic job, and I really want you guys to go and check them out, and it's a fantastic source for all 40k information. So keep it up, Goonhammer, you're amazing. So, in terms of faction matchups that I never usually struggle against, I'm going to unfortunately pick on a few. And I think Sisters is contained because after their nerfs with Brings of Flame and their nerfs to the Miracle Dice, they just didn't exist in the world of 40k, which is sad. I think there's a possible chance with some creative people out there that could bring them back, especially with the new balance data state changes, with the changes to the Miracle Dice, and a few points drop here and there. I can certainly see them at least playing the game. But for now, I don't really see Sisters as a threat because they're still T3 bodies, and we've got great profiles into them. Another army that I consider contained would be Admech. Now, Admech have some fantastic abilities, like stealth across the board. They are cheap enough to field a lot of bodies, and when I say a lot of bodies, it is a lot of bodies, and they can just play a very fundamental game of 40k, which is, I exist, I'm probably not going to do the damage to you, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go first, block you in, stop you from playing the game. So, and it's quite an expensive army in terms of fielding all these models, so not everyone has access to them, so they're not as popular as you might think because it's quite costly and there's a lot of models in there. And there are some fantastic players that play Admech, Johnny being one of them over at Mind Goblins. I would definitely put him not as a contained, I'd probably put him as a moderate threat because it's player skill. But for me, we have great profiles into them. We can, plenty of ways of ignoring modifiers to hits, such as Fire Knife, Crisis Teams, Broadsides can take the upgrade, Riptides, ignore modifiers. So you're not really going to suffer. And then they are still low toughness, maybe models like the Infiltrators are stuck with 2 wounds, so they're not that hard for us to kill. So I would put them in contained for now. In terms of another army that I think has, I suppose, been a little bit of a menace on the tournament scene when the what's it called? The Star Shatter came out. But I think after all the hype, people have kind of adapted, and it's not difficult to beat this faction with our army. And my thought process to this is that, yes, they have all the tricks. They did receive some nerfs with the changes to their reactive moves and various other things, but it still struggles with, if they're taking all the tanks and they're skewing into like Doomsday Ark, Silent King, and so on and so forth, it's a lot of points invested in very little OC and very little ways to pressure you from a combat perspective. So in order to beat Tau, you kind of need that like balance of a couple of high hitting or high damage hitting shooting units to keep Tau players honest on like the firing lanes and the flanks, but you need to have that combat pressure to be able to control board control. So Necrons without that, aka without the Wraiths or loads and loads of like Scorpec combat units, I don't really see them as a threat to us. So for me personally, I would put them as contained because we have plenty of scoring, plenty of units to screen out board against, say, Hypercrypt. I think the only thing is that the Wraiths are very durable when they put a Technomancer in, and then they've got like the reanimations and the 5-up Feel No Pain, 4-up Invuln, top of the 6. But for me, I consider Necrons contained for now, but I could definitely see some lists going into a low threat. So let's keep them at low threat because you still have to respect their builds. And there's even talks of like Carpet Crons coming back with just Silver Horde, loads of dudes, unkillable. And I think that would cause a problem because unless you've got quantity of fire, they can just regenerate between, I don't know, 14 models if you don't kill a unit of 20. And they can do a combo and give it stealth. They could do Resurrection Orb and stuff like that. So I'd put them as a low threat because I think they're going to go through a little bit of a creative cycle and they'll come up with some new builds. Grey Knights. Now, Grey Knights, they have a different type of speed, which is obviously the ability to pick up units, you know, uppy downy, if you will. And when you're going first against them, they're obviously going to get to react to you. But Grey Knights fundamentally struggle with damage because they have the Dread Knights. Yes, they have some tricks in terms of their purifiers and their psychic attacks that they can do the mortals from the Libby. So there's a couple of forms of damage output, but it's mainly banked into Dread Knights, Libby, and with their Warp Bane, they've got a little bit of extra efficiency, but it's still not enough. And you can, with Grey Knights, the reason I consider them contained is the basic fundamental of when you go against them is just to push up with pieces like transports. If you, for example, put transports with breaches and objectives, how are they going to deal with that? Well, they're going to send a 5-man out to contest the objective. And then you get to kill that 5-man. And every resource that they lose is massively painful for them. And then the only way of dealing with the Devilfish is for them to go, well, I'll move the Dread Knights out. Maybe one can't do it. Maybe I have to put 2, maybe even 3. And then that Devilfish dies, but then they need something to be able to shoot the breaches inside. So then they have to put more resource out. And then they've just lost multiple units. 4-ups can still be 4-ups, but for me, I consider Grey Knights contained. Another army that I'd like to move on to is, let's choose a Marine variant. Black Templars, contained. Now, in terms of like the order of things, I'm not going to put too much attention on here, but Black Templars, there is one big thing where it could ruin your game, and the Righteous Crusaders, they have a stratagem that can basically lock you in combat on a 4+. And if they're in the correct vow, it could be on a 3+. And the stipulation to this is that it only works on infantry, so they can't tag you up with your vehicles. But you imagine that you've got a screen in front, they've charged it, they killed it, and they consolidate into an infantry squad like a stealth team or another Fire Warrior squad, for example, or Pathfinders. And then you're like, well, I can fall back. It's a big 20-man brick. I want to shoot all my guns into it. And then they go, nope, on a 4 or a 3, you're locked in combat, and therefore you can't shoot that unit, and it's game over. So as long as you work around that, this matchup is easily manageable. You can play the keep away game, and we've got plenty of really good profiles. Just for an example, you've got, let's say, a Fire Knife Plasma team in Kion with sustain hits 2 with 4 rerolls to hit against them. You're just suddenly going to be shredding a hell of a lot of bodies in one go. You've got quantity of fire coming from burst star scythes in Ret Cadre that you can just be like, okay, strength 6, I'll do this sustain hits 2 stratagem because you've got 11 or more models, and point click, and there's a cold star in there with a high output burst, a cyclic, and 2 burst cannons, and can shred loads of models. So I consider them currently contained. Unless I see some creative lists coming out over the next month or so, I don't consider them a threat. So, Thousand Suns. Now, experienced players against experienced Tau Generals won't struggle against T-Suns because there is a very simple mechanic that you need to kind of build into your Euroweb chip, if you will. That is, their damage comes from wizards seeing through other wizards. And with the ability to then double move or deep strike it in a certain position and then get Magnus to shoot through a wizard, that can be devastating for some of your big pieces like Riptides, Hammerheads, Crisis Suits, whatever it is. So if your game plan allows that, or if you've not planned for it within your game plan, and they get to pull off these tricks, it's going to be devastating. You're going to lose important resources. But if you then actually take a moment to block where their wizards can go and then limit their line of sights, then they're going to struggle, and they're always going to be trading down. So for me, personally, I consider Thousand Suns contained, but I can see a world where they're still a low threat. But then in the next upcoming months, when they get a codex, I expect them to do really well. Because right now, I think Thousand Suns players are just struggling in terms of there's no creativity. It's the same style of lists that are out, and right now I don't really consider them a threat. So I'm going to stick to my guns and say they are a low threat right now. So then, in terms of other low threats, I would put Drukhari as a low threat. Yes, they have loads of stuff. Yes, they have Scourges that can fire and fade innately, but they're still T3 bodies, and they're not quite as anywhere near as powerful as, say, Ynnari or Eldar. So right now, unfortunately, the Drukhari, for me, is on a low threat. But then there are some fantastic generals out there, Skari being one of them with Drukhari, which I think, he is doing the Lord's work with Drukhari. So you've got to also think about the player that's using them. But the average player field is what we're basing this off. So I will put the Drukhari down as a low threat. So sorry, Skari, if I've offended you, but I've also sung your praises. You're a fantastic general, buddy. And hopefully someday we might play each other. In terms of other armies that I would consider low threats or contained, let me have a look. Oh, Imperial agents. You block off their infiltrate and they're not a problem. So that's it. I'm sorry, Imperial agents, you're down there. I don't respect you enough. And that could be my downfall. Watch me get beat by Imperial agents and I'd be like, whoops. Immediate threat. So we look at Votan. So for me, I would put Votan as a low threat. Because Votan are a very honest 40k army. They've got very good shooting, very good combat, they've got some really good stratagems, and they've got some good utility in terms of the bikes, the uppy, downy, or its strat reserve, and the judgment tokens are very good with +1 hit, +1 to wound with 4 targets if they're in the index detachment, and then the new one has 2 with the new slate changes, but it's focused very much on Hearthguard. But the problem with Votan versus Tau is that there's two elements to this. There's one, speed. Now, Votan are deceptively fast if you allow them to be, because all of their vehicles, excluding the land fort, have scout moves. So it's like they're like piranhas. Okay, they'll scout move 6, I believe. Or it could be 9. Let me just double check. But they have scout move, right? And what they basically do is they'll put stuff on the line. There'll be loads of Sagitors, because they've got really good guns as a transport as well. And it allows them to split their 10-man battle line unit. But outside of the scout move, they are slow. They do have Let me have a look. Keywords, abilities, Scout 6. Right, okay, so the Scout 6 and the Movement 12. They can advance and they can get the guys out, but they can't charge, so it's a little bit like our Delphish. But you can just block their scout moves. So if you sacrificed a unit of, say, Farstalkers or even an infiltrating Pathfinder squad just to stop their entire army, because obviously these two units that I mentioned, the Pathfinders and Farstalkers, have got quite a large area that you can deploy them over, because you do a triangle at one end, triangle on the other, and then every model 2 inches apart. And you can screen off the entire midboard. So you could just sacrifice a piece and go, you're not getting scout move for your 6 Agitators and your bikes and everything, so you're staying there. The only risk to this plan is if Votan get the defender role, so they get to deploy a unit first, they could do the same with a unit of Jaegers, and that's what gave Votan the quality of life change that they needed, because without infiltrate, their scout moves would never paid off. So for me, that first roll off for who gets to place their first unit is really important. So I would say that there's an argument to say if Votan got that roll off, they'd be a moderate threat. But you can still play around the movement, and you're never going to be pushing into Votan lines unless they've, played a really bad game, and it's going to be a brawl of the mid-table. Because if you go into their half, you're absolutely going to get ruined by shooting and combat. And if they come into your half, they're absolutely going to get shot to shit. So, for me, it's a very honest way of playing, but I think we just have more output, and we have faster units. And we're cheaper than them as well, so we'll have more resources. So that's why I consider Votan as a low threat. I love the army. I'm building up Votan as well for a second army because I like dwarves and they're cool. So yeah, we'll see. But for now, I think Votan are a low threat. Other armies that I consider a low threat would be right now Space Wolves. I think there is play with the traditional Stormlands because it can catch people out, and it was a menace for a while. And I know there's some really good Space Wolf players out there, Chris Radford, who used to play Space Wolves a lot, and then Matthew McCurdy in the UK, who are absolute monsters with this faction because it's one of their favourites. Now, Stormlands allows them to do various things like reactive moves, but reactive moves, surge moves, should I say, got a little bit nerfed in previous patches, and which kind of slightly took away a few of their tools. But they're still a fast army that can stat check you and run at you, and just if you let them get into your deployment zone, they can tie everything up and make sure that you're not going anywhere, and then win on the primary and then just force you in a corner. So I still think it's a considerable threat, but there's ways that you can stop this. Just enough screens and keeping them at bay whilst you shoot them in the face. Like, as long as you're getting multiple activations out of your key shooting units, they cannot hold up. There is maybe a build where they just go flat out loads of infantry, a little bit like some of these like Blood Angel lists that we've seen, which I think could maybe move them up into a moderate threat. But for now, Space Wolves are on a low threat because they're not seen in force. But maybe that'll change. Maybe with Orcs on the rise and Ynnari, maybe you're going to see a lot more of these melee specialists come through and create initiative lists to upset the meta. But for now, I consider Space Wolves as a low threat. World Eaters. Now, World Eaters is an interesting one because some of you might be like, oh, well, I hate playing World Eaters and they're going to be a high threat or an immediate threat. World Eaters are very, very strong if you let them, similar to the Votan, do their thing. And their thing is scout move. I've got Lord Invocatus, I'll pick 2 infantry units, they get scout move, and then I roll on my Yahtzee chart, and if I get my +2 move, which they pretty much always get, and if they get advance and charge, they just go yeet and run at you. And then you have threat ranges that can range from 21 inches all the way up to like 34 when you factor in scout move, and sometimes more. So an exalted 8-bound unit that will tag you and then lock you in combat as long as it... I think the Exalted 8-bound, I think it's as long as it's not a vehicle, but I could be wrong. It's been a while, but I have played World Eaters quite a lot. Let me just have a look at Exalted 8-bound. Can't even spell right now. 1 minute. Exalted 8-bound. There we are. Abilities. Oh yeah, so it just works on anything. Enemy unit. So they are movement 9, but +2 movement will be 11. They can advance. So that's 17 if they got a 6 in the advance, and then a charge at 12. So that's 29. Plus a scout move of 6, it's 35 inches that they could go from turn 1, if you allow them to. So, in short, all the units that they have can kind of do this. And then all you need to do is just place an infiltrating unit like you would with Votan and just accept that you're not going to try and scout move back, use the Grundy maneuver and stuff like that. You're just going to go, I'm sorry, Pathfinders or Farstalkers, you need to be deployed 90 away from the deployment line because they don't have any infiltrating units. And you go, right, if I go first, great, I can push that screen up and block them in further. Or if I go second, they just die. And then at least the World Eater's army is not running completely at me. And you have to be very good with your screens. So if you are very good with your screens and you're used to playing combat armies, it's a low threat. But if you are maybe a newer player, this would definitely be a moderate threat. So I'm going to put it in moderate threat to respect the newer players out there that might be watching my channel thinking, well, actually, I just kept getting steamrolled by World Eaters. My advice to you is infiltrate a unit, block their scout moves, and then really focus on your screening, limiting where they can go and keeping track of what, if they have the +2 move and if they have advance and charge, and then place your screens in such a way where models can't move over you or then can't consolidate after they've killed you into a fresh unit. So just focus on your screens. Then we'll move on to another faction, and the other faction I'd like to kind of just talk about would be... Let's go with the Knights. So I'm going to straight away just put Moderate Threat, Chaos Knights, and Imperial Knights. And the reason for this is that they are stat check armies. If you have not brought the relevant guns to deal with big knights, or 13 little knights, or 11 little knights, you're going to be in for a rough time. Tau do have some fantastic profiles to kill big boys, like Knights and Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights. Things like broadsides with rails, hammerheads, Sunforge. You've got quite a lot. But if you do not bring at least, say, 3 to 4 anti-tank pieces, this game is going to be rough for you because they have high OC. And the difference between these two is that the efficiency with Imperial Knights, with the free reroll to hit and wound and some stratagems that they can do, has got decent output. Whereas Chaos Knights are going to be, well, I've got some melters, but I'm also going through walls and I'm charging you. So these are moderate threats, and they probably always will do, because if you have brought the right relevant profiles into them, great. If you haven't, you're going to be up shit creek with that paddle. So that covers those two. And then now I'm going to just kind of focus on a little bit of the high threats. So for me, I'm just going to grab the high threats and then briefly talk about them. So the high threats for me are going to be the new demons. I'm going to choose the new Custodes detachments. And then I'm going to also choose... Blood Angels. And Guard. Demons. We've had the Legions of Excess nerfed, which is great. But what they've been replaced with is the new Demon Detachment. And in short, Lone Op 18, Be'lakor, and everything within 6 inches of him is Lone Op 18, which is a pain. It forces you closer to the demons. Then they've got some fantastic stratagems for a unit that can have Scout Move 9, and then Khorne units have Advance and Charge. So you can have a Blood Crusher unit going 19 inches, and that's before making like a charge. And then you've got things like Flesh Hounds that can go uppy downy, and then there's a stratagem to make something go uppy downy as well on a strat reserve. So it's going to be uppy downy stuff to contend with, plus fast moving Khorne units, and the rest of the stuff's going to be Lone Op 18 when it's within 6 inches of Be'lakor. And that's quite an annoying mechanic to deal with. So you'll have to do your research on this and prepare for demons. My next one I've chosen is Custodes, because there's a couple of things. Obviously, Solar Spearhead has been a popular Custodes choice recently, because it's like Dreadnoughts, special Dreadnoughts with enhancements and go through walls and various things. And then you've had like old Warden bricks in terms of the Golden Host, or whatever it's called, the original one, with just like durable Warden bricks, 2+ save, 4+ invulnerable save, 4+ spinal pain, and if you kill it, great. If you don't, you're in for a world of pain. And then the new detachment gives them a little bit more flexibility because it's mixing a little bit of the talents of the Emperor, which is like the reactive move Custodian detachment. And they have that now, so once you shoot them, they can reactive move. So if they did go Warden Bricks, they can have one that goes in the middle and goes, I'm popping my 4-up Feel of Pain, and the other one's there, and you shoot that. Cool, because you don't want to waste your shots into the 4-up Feel of Pain. I'll reactive move this, and then, get into you. So, and then also there's a crazy thing that they can do with the big unit of Eldar Terminators, where they can split them all, and if they split them all into singles, and they can uppy downy with each of the separate ones. So there's a little bit of jank that we'll need to see in the lone up characters and resing a character. So I still think Custodes are a high stat check army, a high threat because of the stat check that they can do to you. Combat, whatever touches in combat usually kills us anyway, but it's more of the fact that, like, did your guns do what you needed to when I presented a wall of it's like what they call it, like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. If you bounce, then unfortunately they're going to get into you and it's going to be difficult. The Blood Angels I've put as a high threat because a lot of lists that I've been seeing recently have just been, I know it's been a Blood Angels list, Bloodless Angels, but Alex Harrison and Josh Roberts took a list which was pretty much just like loads and loads of MSU, loads of jump packs, and just ran at you. And the problem with small units versus us is that it really puts pressure on our guiding, because you have to then go, well, if it's loads of 5-mans, I have to set up a guiding unit and then shoot it, and then I have to keep doing that. And the attrition, when they present one 5-man unit, you have to present a guiding unit and a crisis team to kill that. Because obviously ignore cover is really important, because if they armor contempt, it lowers your efficiency, and then obviously if you hit on 4s, it lowers your efficiency again. So you do kind of have to present 2 things to kill 1 thing, and if they've got loads and loads of small units, it's going to become a problem for us. And then being able to kind of always threaten tagging your pieces to minimize your movement, that's always going to be a high threat. Any army that can go wide from an MSU perspective, and threaten us in terms of our movement, which is our biggest strength, then that's always going to be a high threat to us. And finally, Imperial Guard. So Imperial Guard are a high threat because they're going to pivot from Bridgehead into, I think it's like the Siege one. Let me just make sure I'm getting that right. Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum. It is the, is it the, or the Mechanized Assault? Right, okay, cool. Let's just load it up now. I think it's this one. Hammer of the Emperor. Hammer of the Emperor. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. Basically, the detachment that's going to basically allow them vehicles to move through walls. So you're going to see a switch to Rogel Dawn tank commanders. You're also going to see Toroxes, and it's like basically a Montcar style detachment. And they're just going to have, with Guard, it's always a war of attrition versus them. Tau versus Guard, you both have really good long-range firepower. Guard really don't have the combat like they used to with Bulgarin, and so it's just bodies meet bodies. And if Guard outbody you in terms of like their battle line units, Katachan jungle fighters, Cadian shock troops, maybe Death Corps of Krieg, and you have not got enough infantry in your list, they're just going to go, here's a vehicle, here's like a chimera with some dudes inside, what are you going to present to kill it? And then you got to kill the infantry dudes that come out, or you then send out your infantry piece to out OC, but then the chimera has flamers and things like that. And then you're really going to have to think about how you're contesting the objectives and how you're playing that early game kind of tit for tat. You know, I send out this small piece to bait you. I also send out a small piece to bait you. So whoever runs out of those resources first tends to lose the big engagements, which are, I've got my, big crisis brick, or I've got my big scion brick. Whichever one gets to do multiple activations where their big shooting unit is going to win this firefight. So Guard are always a high threat, because you have to bear in mind that you do need lots of infantry screens, whether that's like a couple of Kroot teams, a couple of Pathfinder teams, maybe some Kroot Hounds, or maybe you've gone like a strike team and then your breaches on top of that. So you do need cheap expendable infantry to play this tit for tat. So then we've hit the half an hour mark, so I want to kind of wrap things up a little bit, because I don't want it to be too long, but I want to give you the information that you come to my channel for. So what I'd like to do is, right now, I'm just going to fill out the rest and talk about it really briefly. I'm going to put Emperor's Children in high threat because it's going to be new, and we need to see some like creative lists coming out. But just simply having units that can infiltrate, scout, battle line, sticky sounds a bit annoying to me. Whilst staging the rest of the army to come and absolutely clap you in the face, and then Noise Marines shooting stuff. So I think because it's new, I'm going to put it in high threat, but I'm going to keep a close eye on Emperor's Children. In terms of moderate threats, Death Guard, they're a stat check army. They have got a really good army-wide rule that can mess with our ballistic skill or saves. So Death Guard, stat check, tanks, durable bodies, loads of cheap trading, plague drones, you name it. And then maybe they take Morty as well, with his aura of I ignore mods, and then Plague Burst Crawlers, always a moderate threat. Tyranids are always a moderate threat because the Shadows of the Warp is a pain in the ass. Because they can just shut down your secondaries and shut down your primaries and shut down our guiding. So with Tyranids, my biggest advice to you is that you need to make sure that you always try to contest their primaries and keep their primaries in check, because when I've played Tyranids, I've always tried to force the Tyranid player to use their Shadows of the Warp in their own turn to secure them primary, which means that I don't have my secondaries influenced by Battle Shock. And it also means that at least it's only increasing their primary, not decreasing my primary and my secondary and my guiding. So get aggressive against Tyranids. Make sure you squeeze them on the primary front to force them to use Shadows of the Warp in their own turn. But a lot of the lists are still stat check, Crusher Stampede, with lots of Exocrines, lots of Tyrannofexes, Lictors, and so on and so forth, and maybe even the Norn Emissary. Death Watch I'm going to put as moderate threat because I think they're good. I think they have really good profiles. I think they have loads of good quantity shots and the ability to go up downy, and they can play that kind of Grey Knight game but with just way more output. So Death Watch I always respect, and I think we're going to see some creative Death Watch lists over the next coming months. Then Creations of Bile, I would put, and Creations of Bile I meant Chaos Space Marines, but specifically, I got ahead of myself there. Creations of Bile, it's a stat check, loads and loads of bodies that can just be like ranging from T5 to T7, and they can still advance and charge with Lords and Rhinos and things like that. Fabius Bile, it's just crazy. It's just, if you've not brought three damage weapons, you're in for a rough game. So Possessed have 3 wounds, Terminators, so on and so forth. So you definitely need to look at flat 3 damage. So Iron Hammerheads, Plasma Rifle, Fire Knife teams, they're all going to be absolutely golden. Maybe Cadres with Breaches for the quantity of shots, because you definitely need quantity and quality to down these big blobs. And obviously Warp Talons are still a thing, and that's really annoying to deal with. And obviously it's not just the extra toughness, they have got a chart where they can add various buffs to units like +2 move, and mainly the toughness and the extra stuff and sustain, all that. They've got all the tricks. They basically create monsters, and that's why I'd have that as a moderate threat. Gene Stealers is always going to be a moderate to high threat because of the amount of bodies it can bring, but we do have really good kind of volume into them. Rec Card specifically because you can do the fire and fade, and Montcar's really good because you can get aggressive. Kion would struggle against GSC historically because they can just rush you with 200 odd bodies, which is not something that you want to face, especially if you've focused all your attentions on Sky Rays, Riptides, which you're kind of wanting to do in Kion, but even the sustain hits 2 won't be enough to carry you through that. Ultramarines, I'd always consider a moderate threat because of the Double Oath and Gilliman and loads of ways of just spending stratagems without spending stratagems. They've got loads of ways of doing free strats and then gaining a CP. I know they took a little bit of adjustment with a few things being nerfed in the balanced data slate, like the Victrix Guard, I think they're called, and Calgar things, which is not as quite potent, but still, I consider them a moderate threat, and it's a very honest way of playing 40k. But with Tau, we have great profiles into the Marines, so I can keep that as a fair and honest matchup, a respectful one. Dark Angels, at the moment, I'm not really seeing anything. The day of the loads of Inner Circle Deathwing Knights are gone, but I think they might creep back. So I consider them as a low threat right now, but it's very similar to Custodes in terms of a stat check style list. But I'm not really seeing any innovative lists, but I know a few really good players. Lewis on Mind Goblins played them religiously quite a lot over the past, and I'd say if he did want it to go into Dark Angels again, I'm sure he would come up with some spice. And then finally, we've got Eldar and Orcs, and I'll leave Tau separately. So, Eldar, Orcs. These two are imminent threat, like immediate, like 100% immediate threat. Obviously, the Orcs you don't need to go into. Their new detachment is bonkers. It's insane. I don't know what GW was thinking. You'll have seen it all over Reddit, the internet, people going, what the hell? And it's because they just nerfed Tactical Brigade and then suddenly went, for us, it's like a kick in the teeth a little bit. I'll be honest, as much as I love the new detachment and the things that they're doing to try and help us, this is like, oh, do you just want Kion all the time with Sustain It's 2? We'll give you Montcar as well if you want, because we'll give you Assault. But if that's not good enough, well, I'll tell you what we'll do is your combat, because you're Orcs, well, we'll just give you a really good combat strat as well for 4 rerolls to wound. And then, but it's okay though, because Orcs hit bad, right? Sustain hits 2, it's okay. It's going to be crap on a unit that hits on 5s, right? Surely they can't have ways of rerolls and pluses to hit and big shock attack guns that just ruin your day. It's all nuts. Oh, and then don't worry about it. If you don't want to commit everything, you just want to send one unit out in the war, here's a strat. And then Gaz can have lethal aura of 12. So you have lethals. And ignore cover because AP1 is really bad, right? Well, I'll tell you what, if this character's within 18 and not visible, you don't have to be visible, just ignore cover for everything that's shooting at that. And looters and blah, 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 blah. It's insane. So this army is like ultimate combat, Predator, and ultimate shooting. They shoot better not just than Tau, than any army in the game. Combat, they have brilliant combat that can go toe-to-toe with anything in the game. What are we doing? So everybody, regardless of whether they love or hate Tau, we're all in the same boat, and we're all looking at Orcs going, nah, get out of here. So it wouldn't surprise me if that gets some sort of emergency. I'd like to see it get emergency treated, because it's just way too strong. The other army that is currently a hot potato on the meta is Eldar, but not specifically Aspect Host or any other cool detachments like Seer Council or the other ones. But mainly we're seeing 2 detachments, aren't we? We're seeing Aspect Host with all the cool Fire Dragons, Warp Spiders, the Aspect characters, the Phoenix Lords like Fuegan, Lycis, Jane Zar, so on and so forth. And then we're also seeing like the Warp Spiders, the Fire Dragons, the Dark Reapers, the Wave Serpents, the Aslerman with his Dire Avengers, but obviously Aslerman's taken a little bit of a hit, but that never really affected us. It was more the fact that he had anti-infantry 3+, and once per game devastate wounds and just goes pop, 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 kill Terminators. He can kill like 5 or 6. But now it's changed to anti-infantry 5+. But we don't care about that because if you shoot at breaches, then cool, they're already dead. So aspect host is fine in my opinion. It's kind of cool. They had a few points hikes here and there, so it squeezes the list a little bit more. But it's the Ynnari specifically that's really annoying because of lethal intent. So that causes us a massive problem because we operate in the shooting phase, and should you kill something, it triggers in shooting phase at the end. It triggers their lethal intent. So because it's a normal move, it helps trigger things like their tokens. So a wave serpent with content inside, whether that be fire dragons, whether that be a combat unit, whatever it's inside it, it then goes, right, end of the shooting phase, I'm going to move 14 inches, which is its base normal move. But I'm going to trigger my star engines, which is d6 plus 1 inches to that move. So on average, it's going 18 inches, but it can go up to 21 inches. And that's at the end of your shooting phase. And then it's their turn next. And they do it again. So if they do the average twice, that's 36 inches that wave serpent with the content can move, and then they can get out 3. So that's 39. If they rolled max twice, highly unlikely, but we're talking theory here, that could be 42 inches and then get out 3. So that's 45 inches and then shoot you or combat you. Obviously, if it's going to combat you, it wouldn't be able to move and get out and charge. It would have to just move the 14 plus d6 plus 1, then get out, no overwatch on me, and then charge you. Get out, move, and then charge. Or if it's a shooting unit, it's going to go potentially between, 36 plus 39 to 45 after it disembarks. And there's many, many other ways of stuff that they can do. If you shoot and you don't kill, if you're trying to tickle them away, they can react to move. There's so much jank, and it's very uninteractive because it's all kind of happening in your own turn. So that we expected to see some sort of nerf, whether it's just a limitation on the lethal intent that can only move up to 7 or whatever. But I think even that fix of just move up to 7 is just acceptable. Right now it feels that they can just do whatever. So, okay, guys, if you finally the Tau. Tau is just interesting. It's always a moderate threat for me. or contained. It all depends on how you look at it. In terms of my take on Tau, I think, just to finalize things, Retcad is the strongest, then it's Montcar, and then I'm going to put the new experimental weaponry cadre because I'm practicing with it at the moment, and I think it's got some legs, and then it's Kion, Kroot, and then Auxiliary last. So I think, in short, Retcad's really good because you've got the consistency of being able to fire and fade, which means that you're never losing in the trade war if you manage it correctly. I think you can bring loads of guns to bear, and with the extra EP within 9 inches and the extra strength within 12, it's such a good force multiplier that it just kind of does it consistently. And I'm well practiced with retaliation, so I think it's the strongest one we have, even though the stats aren't showing so. It's irrespective in my opinion. I think right now, with all the high threats that are about and the immediate threats, I'd say that Retcad is equipped to beat these factions, but you have to be on it with everything: positioning, deployment, list building, the whole lot. And then Montcar can just get aggressive against a lot of these aggressive armies, which always is a positive because they don't expect it. And 2, aggression isn't all about doing damage, it's about controlling the board in front of you, controlling the pace of the game, and inevitably this helps control the scoring of the game. And if you're always in control of the scoring element, whether you're choosing just to bully, block, get primary before they do and stop them from getting to their primary, that's always going to help you. Or if you're hunting down their secondary pieces, aka what we call action monkeys, or units that are going to be doing secondaries, like small scout units or small little units that are not there to do damage, that's there to go and do an action. If you're removing those, you're removing the resources the opponent is relying on for scoring. And Montcar can absolutely do both of these things and kind of in sync with each other, so you can do both in one go. You could be blocking, you could be denying the primary and removing their assets. So I believe that Retcad and Montcar are really strong, and I think what's giving us some strength in this new detachment is the lone op 18 and -1 to wound stratagem for battlesuit. So if you keep 2 CP going into your opponent's turn, this detachment's good. But anyway, for more information with all this kind of breakdown and stuff, come and join the Puretide Program. Obviously, a lot of this stuff in terms of the specialized content is behind a paywall. It's on like Pathfinder, Shasprey, Chassel. You'll be seeing in my content scheduling that I've been doing every week. There's different things for all levels. It's not just always at the highest tier. And I'd love for you to explore a little bit that with me. Come and join the Discord, even at the free tier, ask questions, see what it's about. But if you want to basically push yourself to the next level in terms of your gaming and your competitive ability, then join the tiers. My average one, well, sorry, not the average one, but the one that I would recommend would be the Shasprey as a starting one, because it gives you access to the list building calls every 2 weeks, and that's a very popular call, and the Q&A session, Quiz the Commander with me. And if you're going to constant events and you're looking to go to that X&1 or 5-0 win event, then the Chassel package is for you. And if maybe you're a newer player and you just want to come and see and learn a bit, then Pathfinders, I've got plenty of content that I'm uploading constantly to the Academy training. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time. And remember, like, subscribe, comment, help me out with the YouTube algorithm. You guys have been doing a fantastic job with that so far. We've been growing the likes, the engagement, the subscribers on YouTube. It's really, 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 really helpful. So thank you so much. And obviously, the Puretide program is growing daily. So again, once again, I'd just like to take time and say thank you. So from me, that's all today. I hope you've enjoyed this tier list. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments around maybe you disagree with a few of these selections here. Maybe you think certain factions should be higher in the threat. Let me know, because one thing I've enjoyed about the comments on the last video I did is there's loads of comments with their thoughts and their opinions on the new detachment. I'd love for you guys to put your thoughts into this tier list and give me your suggestions in terms of what armies you're struggling with, where you think they sit. But enjoy the rest of your days and weeks, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care.